Welcome to Vigilant News, everyone. For our guest today, we have Sheriff Mack.
Sheriff Mack is the former sheriff of Graham County, Arizona, and a political activist. He's known for his role in a successful lawsuit brought against the federal government of the United States, which alleged that portions of the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act violated the United States Constitution. He's a former lobbyist for Gun Owners of America and a two-time candidate for United States Congress. He's most well known for being the founder of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association and established the County Sheriff Project movement. Sheriff Mack, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan and Justin. It's one of my favorite days of all time. I love 4th of July. I love patriotism. I love the Founding Fathers, and I love Almighty God, who allowed all this and had his hand in all of this. So a great day, and I love reminiscing about the greatness of the American experiment and the experiment called self-government, which has been lost a long time ago.
Amen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. For those of you guys who don't know, because we're pre-recording, it is July 4th, which is a pretty auspicious day to talk to somebody like you. So I'm excited to have a good conversation with you. So I figured a good place to start is just introducing you to our audience. I'm familiar with you, but admittedly, it's been some time since I had a chance to dig into what you've been up to. And you've been doing some really amazing things. So can you give our audience just an overview of who are you, how did you get into this, and things like that?
Well, I'm wearing my 4th of July shirt, and I'm wearing my CSPOA, the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association hat, which all of you can order off our website. But yeah, I never planned this for my life. I never planned to be an activist. I never planned to run for office except for sheriff. That's all I wanted to be. That's all I've ever wanted to be. That's what I want to be right now. I wish I was just retiring. I'm 71 years old. I've spent the last, I started in law enforcement in 1979. And I tried to get in the FBI. My father was a retired FBI agent. And boy, he would be turning over in his grave looking at how criminal the FBI is and how they've allowed themselves to be a political hit squad for presidents and other politicians, and even for political parties, and especially the Democrat Party using and misusing, we should say, the FBI. But they've allowed it, and they go along with it. And even the, quote, good people that are in the FBI, I don't trust them anymore either. Mm-hmm. You're either a good Christian and you stand against the crimes of all agencies, even the one you might work for, but you compromise your standards to keep your paycheck. What kind of a person does that make you? So right. We already have enough political whores in Washington, D.C. We don't need any more. So I got into law enforcement in 1979 in Provo, Utah. I am from Arizona. I was raised in Arizona. I love Arizona. Right now it's a little bit too hot, but other than that, I mean, I learned growing up that the heat is just an excuse to go swimming. So, amen. It's great. But I tried to get in the FBI. That didn't work out. Thank God that never worked out. And then I got with the police department in Provo, Utah, and I stayed there a little over 11 years. And I did everything in law enforcement that you could possibly imagine. I was a school resource officer. I was a patrol officer. I was a patrol sergeant. I was a detective. The school resource officer thing, oh my goodness. I handled all the juvenile delinquency from 12 schools. I did the entire school district, but also I handled all calls from the school, from all the schools, from teachers who said, I think this student is being abused at home or someplace else. I handled all of those calls. So I became a specialist in crimes against children and crimes committed by children. And some of those cases, I'm still trying to get out of my mind because of the cruelty from families towards their own children.
I can imagine.
And man, oh man, anyway, enough said about that. So then there came a point in my career about 3 years after I started that I noticed that none of us really adhered to the Constitution. And my wife's family were very constitutional. They were very religious, and they were very constitutional. And it's like their religion and the Constitution were intertwined. And it's fine with me because I think the Constitution was inspired by God. And I totally believe that. I believe he raised the founding fathers up for this very purpose of creating America. And so I really almost quit my job because I couldn't live with it and stay in law enforcement that we don't keep our oath of office. And I really studied that, and my wife told me, you don't need to quit your job. You just need to stand for what you believe in. And so that's what I did. I stayed a cop, and I always brought it up. Why don't we study the Constitution? We have sworn an oath in God's name that we're going to uphold and defend, protect, and preserve the United States Constitution and the Constitution, Utah or Arizona, wherever we work as a cop. And yet we never study either one.
That's right.
And every now and again, we'll bring up case law. Do we ever bring up the principle of the Constitution that's being protected by the case law that we study randomly? And I said, first of all, if Congress or the local legislature in our state promulgates gun control laws, are we going to obey the Constitution, i.e. the Second Amendment, or are we going to follow the legislature? And if the legislature strays far away from the Constitution, do we as the executive branch have an obligation to go along with them or to stand against them? And I determined that it was stand against them. And so when I moved home to Arizona in 1988 to run for Graham County Sheriff in my hometown, I committed to a very strong constitutional administration. And I got elected, and then I was reelected in 1992. And then here came the Brady Bill, signed in 1993. I didn't really worry about it at that time. I didn't think it was a big deal. It was advertised just as a waiting period and all that. I thought that was nonsense. I certainly didn't agree with waiting periods or government interference with the Second Amendment, but it didn't appear to be too big of a deal that I was going to risk my life and career for to stop it. Then on January 21st, 1994, 3 BATF agents showed up at our Arizona Sheriff's Association meeting in Phoenix. There's only 15 counties in Arizona, and only 13 sheriffs were at this meeting. But 3 agents handed us a 25-page document what our marching orders were, what we all had to do in order to enforce the Brady Bill for the federal government. And in that document, it showed the Brady Bill where it said, anyone who knowingly violates this section of the Brady Bill or the GCA, the Gun Control Act of 1968, anyone who violates these provisions will be subject to a year in prison or a $10,000 fine or both. And I have a highlighted review of my case. It's in this little booklet. It fits in your pocket. It's just a pocket size. This is the most valuable small book you could get, except for a pocket constitution. And I highly recommend both. This is a highlighted version of my Supreme Court case. And I put the threat of arrest inside here so everyone could see that if we were not subservient, if the sheriffs of the United States were not subservient to the federal government, i.e. the Clinton administration, we were subject to arrest. If we didn't violate our oath and violate the Constitution, we were subject to arrest.
Wow.
And so I became the first sheriff in American history to launch a major lawsuit against the federal government. I had the help of the NRA. And then Thank goodness, 6 other sheriffs joined me in that lawsuit. Sheriff Prince, who was the second one to join, I guess it was rightfully so. The first one that filed, myself, and the second one that filed, Sheriff Prince, were the 2 that were granted certiorari by the United States Supreme Court. And indeed, that was the time that Sheriff Prince and I went with our lawyers and had a hearing. And on the final day of the term in 1997, on the final day of the U.S. Supreme Court term in 1997, June 27, 1997, they issued the ruling in our favor. And it is the most, it went 10 times further than I ever imagined or dreamed. And I will tell every one of you, you need to read this. It is the most powerful states' rights, 10th Amendment, local autonomy decision in the history of America, written and authored by Justice Antonin Scalia.
And where can people get their hands on this little book?
Yeah.
At my website, cspoa.org. And folks, take a look at the name. It's Supreme Court case for state sovereignty. So it looks real big. The book looks real big on the website, but it's not. Just make sure you get the right color and that the state flags are all on the little booklet. It's only 16 pages. You can read this in 10 minutes, but I challenge you to really spend some time on it. Really study this out. Scalia does something absolutely amazing, miraculous.
Real quick, let me just jump in real quick.
Miracle.
I just want to mention, everybody, that we're going to have links to everything that we're talking about in the description, so we'll make sure we have the right version of there. Go ahead, Sheriff.
So Scalia did something that the Supreme Court hardly ever does. And he says the answer to the Clio's challenge. Now, did you catch that word? That it's actually an acronym.
Clio's challenge.
Clio's.
Yes. Do you have any idea what that is?
Is it Clio or E-Clio?
No, Clio. C-L-E-O.
C-L-E-O. I do not.
He's talking about the sheriffs who filed the case. It says the answer to the Clio's challenge. So he's calling us the chief law enforcement officers. And the Brady Bill itself calls the sheriffs the Clios. So by federal law and, federal pretend legislation and the United States Supreme Court decision, Sheriff Prince and I and the others, I guess, that challenges and all sheriffs are the Clios, the chief law enforcement officers. And I love what he finishes here. To the Clio's challenge must be sought in historical understanding and practice. See, he's not trying to create anything new. He's not trying to follow the political dogma of a party or of a politician or of a president or anything else. He's taking us through a history lesson that proves the sheriff does not answer to the federal government and that the federal government has very limited authority. Right. And this decision makes that extremely clear, and that they violated and exceeded their authority when they did all the COVID-19 mandates, and that they try to force us all into their version of saving the planet pursuant to global warming or global change or whatever else, whatever their terminology is of the day that makes it more clear that we should all just follow them. First of all, let me give you one quote from the decision. In 1992, New York State sued the federal government because the federal government wanted to force them to take nuclear waste and store it in New York. The legislature said, no way. The governor said, no way. We're not taking that crap and we don't want it here. And you have to because we're the federal government and we're ordering you to. So in 1992, Scalia takes that decision and quotes from it in my decision, in Sheriff Prince and my decision, the sheriff's decision. And it says this: we have held, however, that state legislatures are not subject to federal direction. So clearly, the federal government is not our boss, and we must remain autonomous and answerable to the people of our state and of our counties. The sheriff works for the people of his county and only them, and they are the only supervisor or boss that the sheriffs of this country have.
That's right. It's huge.
So,
yeah. Go ahead. You go.
well, he mentioned sheriffs take this oath when elected to uphold the Constitution, to protect people's inalienable rights.
Right.
And you said it was just you and one other sheriff. So there's more than 3,000 sheriffs across the country.
Correct.
By your estimation, how many of them actually honor that oath above their own self-interest?
That's a good question. I know a lot of sheriffs, but I don't know them all. So I hesitate to give you a strong answer on that. But according to my personal contact with sheriffs over the past 15, 20, 25, 35 years, since I became a sheriff myself in 1988, and from then on till now, I've been working closely with sheriffs all across the country. I can tell you there's 3 states that do not have sheriffs. Alaska and Hawaii never established the office when they came into the Union in 1959, and Connecticut voted the office out of the state about 28 years ago.
Okay.
Huge mistake. So now all they have are state police or police state. And they do not have law enforcement that is answerable and accountable directly to the people. And I believe that's a huge mistake. That it kills the constitutional republic that we have. The republic is that we, the people, choose our representatives at every level in all 3 branches. And once you take that stewardship or power away from us, you're destroying our constitutional republic. And that's what Connecticut did. So 47 states do have sheriffs, and there's about 3 or 4 that don't have the sheriff be very powerful. Pennsylvania took arrest authority away from the sheriff. Absolutely absurd. As did Delaware, Massachusetts, and I think also Rhode Island. So about 4 of them. The rest of the states, all 43 of us, the sheriff is the top dog. He is the head law enforcement. He is the Clio. And so people ask all the time, where do you see that the sheriff is the chief law enforcement? He's not even mentioned in the Constitution. I said, no, either is your state governor, either is your mayor or your city council. It's ridiculous. It's the federal Constitution. It doesn't establish all the office for the states and counties. You have to do that on your own. So it's just the power of the people must be respected, because that's what makes us a republic. And Ben Franklin said when he got out of the Constitutional Convention to a lady neighbor who asked him, well, what kind of government did you leave us? And he said 2 things very, very apropos to today, to celebrating the 4th of July. First, he said, a republic. So why do all our politicians and CNN went down outside and did a street interview with everybody that came along? Do you know what form of government we have? And do you know that the MAGA people, and the Trump people believe that we're a republic, that we're not a democracy? And so I will tell everyone who calls America a democracy, first of all, you're very ignorant and you're lying. You're very mistaken. One of those categories fits you. And why don't you show me anywhere in history where the founding fathers were trying to establish or make America a democracy in any way? So tell me the founding fathers that said, man, we can't wait to get this new democracy going. In fact, some of the founders said a democracy is a horrible type of government, and that, and get this, that it is like 3 wolves and a lamb voting what's for dinner.
Right.
In other words, they presented mobocracy. Democracy is mobocracy, which becomes a dictatorship to enforce the will of the majority on the rest of the people. that is not what America was supposed to be.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's so much we could get into here, and I wanted to talk to you about just kind of the substance of what the Constitution is, because I'm big into law. I work with a law group that is actively releasing maxims of law, and one of them is sovereign law that we just released. And what a lot of people don't realize is that a sovereign is actually a servant. That's where the term comes from, to serve. And it comes from the 8th century during the Carolingians, if I remember correctly. And what it also requires is a valid oath. Now, if you don't understand the oath that you're taking, because you've never read it, or you don't know the meaning of it or its significance, then it has almost no power, because an oath is basically the fourth part of a contract. It's the part where you actually accept the duties and obligations that you're taking on under certain terms and conditions that are enumerated in the contract. And so it seems like what they've done, and this is what I wanted to ask you, it seems like they've taken one of the most powerful provisions for protecting our rights as citizens of the United States away from us, because they've essentially neutered the sheriffs. They don't know what they're doing. You just mentioned a good chunk of them don't even realize, what you've been up to and the significance you've had. I would argue that they've probably even been propagandized to the extent that they think just doing whatever the federal government tells them is the best thing that they should do. They don't understand that they're actually answering to the people. So do you think it's possible for a sheriff oath to really mean anything when he doesn't actually understand his oath?
No, and I say this, in our training that we do with sheriffs, we mention that. And in my books, I've written 5 or 6 books. I've actually written more, but 2 are out of print. But that's what we deal with. In my book, The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope, or the other book, The Proper Role of Law Enforcement, we discuss that very issue. How can you take an oath and you've never read it or studied it? How do you know how to protect the people of your county? How do you fulfill your obligation to protect their rights, as detailed in the Declaration of Independence, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men? How can you do that job if you don't know what the rights of the people are?
Right.
And we focus on the Bill of Rights, and there's about 28, 29 rights, depending on how you, conjugate some of the amendments. So there's 5 in number 1. We all know those 5. Okay, but in the 8th, is cruel and unusual punishment, is that 2 or is that 1?
Right. Yeah.
Or excessive fines or bail, is that 2 or is that 1? Mm-hmm. So you're going to come up with 27, 28, 29, maybe 30 at the most. And then when you read them all, you'll get there. But in number 6, there's about 9. And I maintain that in the Second Amendment, there's actually 2. It talks about the importance of a well-regulated militia, and then it also adds to that, which isn't a contradiction, but some sheriffs actually say that's a contradiction. We're not a well-regulated, we're not a militia. Well, yes, we are. You don't know the definition of militia.
Right.
We might not be the militia as described in Article 1, Section 8, that Congress calls out to quell invasions and insurrections and enforces the law of the Union. And I admit that's one part I don't understand, because some people say, well, the National Guard replaced that in 1906. Well, that means we were a militia and using the people of the militia for 115 years or so, or longer. And so I don't buy any of that, really, but I do want to know that, and I guess I need to contact Edwin Vieira, because he's a specialist on the militia. But I do know that the sheriff has the authority to call out the militia or the posse. That's been historical fact for a couple of 100 centuries, maybe more. We certainly saw that in old Western movies, and it was appropriate and proper for the sheriff to do that, and he does have that power. But this, the only one other question that I didn't finish answering for you that I want to make sure I did. I believe that there's about a good strong third of the sheriffs. So I say about 1,000 sheriffs that believe, and one news agency that was following me and really wanting to know what the CSPOA was all about. They actually did a survey with sheriffs, and they had about 45% of the sheriffs that believed in our dogma and our mission statement, and that is teaching the Constitution. I have a class called the Constitution for Law Enforcement, and I could do it for Constitution for school teachers, or the Constitution for broadcast journalists like yourself, or whatever. It's the same. It's pretty much the same class, but I specify in the class for law enforcement that we understand what our duty is when it comes to the Fourth Amendment. Are we making sure that we're obtaining probable cause and signed warrants, and that we're respecting all of this, especially the Fifth Amendment and the Sixth Amendment, that we're making sure that the people's rights to due process are being protected? And do we understand the Ninth Amendment? And maybe we need to read that one here too, just to make sure.
Yeah, let's do it.
But and by the way, when you brought up the oath of office, why are we required by law, by the supreme law of the land, to take that oath? Well, that's Article 6, not Amendment 6. Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution requires all members of all three branches of the government to swear an oath of allegiance to the United States Constitution. So how could you keep that oath? And it's a matter of integrity that you take that oath and then summarily ignore it. How could you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And so we really want all of them to understand the significance of the oath. And Amendment 9, there's only 7 articles. Okay, Amendment 9, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Now,
So
that's some pretty big words there, but it's if you look at it and study it over, it's not that hard to get. Right. And I can explain it real quickly if you want me to.
yeah, please do.
Okay, so the enumeration, that means the numbering. You can list them. You can go through the Constitution and list your rights, or list the duties of government. And the federal government doesn't even have 40. They've stolen thousands.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's where the states now have to come in and take those back.
And so the Ninth basically says even if they're not listed anymore, those rights are still protected.
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, very good. Just for instance, if you go to the Constitution and read the Bill of Rights, and you say, well, heck, there's only about 30 rights there. Certainly, I have more. And yes, you do. For instance, after I get home from work, do I have a right to go to a movie? Do I have a right to go to the store?
Yep.
Do I have a right to take piano lessons? Do I have a right to go to my son's baseball game? Do I have a right to go to a baseball game? Or do I have to get permission for all of that? Mm-hmm. No. Just because it's not listed in the Constitution doesn't mean you don't have it.
Right.
For instance, does this Constitution specify that you and I have a right to be fathers? No, it doesn't.
Nope.
But I guarantee I'm going to retain that right no matter what government says to me. And government has to respect that. And they don't do very well on that sometimes either. But so basically it's that, and I really appreciate your input on that. Just because it's not listed doesn't mean you don't have it. And so people say, well, the government will say, these are the only rights you have because these are the only ones listed in the Constitution. So no way. No.
Yeah. Right.
So, and back to the sheriffs, I have one story that I've got to tell you. During the COVID mandates and the farce known as the COVID mandates, and their assurance that this was only going to be a 2-week time frame for us to close everything down and wear masks. Then it went on to 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And a pastor by the name of Caleb Cooper in New Mexico and his sheriff, Sheriff Glenn Hamilton, in Sevier County, New Mexico. The pastor, who was not the pastor of the sheriff, but worked and had his flock, if you will, in the county where this good sheriff was. And this sheriff has been to our training, and he's been to other constitutional training, and he was pretty dedicated to the Constitution. And the pastor contacted him and said, "Hey, Sheriff Hamilton, I just have to let you know that I'm not going to close my church, and I want to know what you're going to do about it, because I want to be protected, and I'm not going to shut down. And if that means they're going to haul me off to jail, then I guess that's what it means." And the sheriff put his arm on the good pastor's shoulder and said, "If it takes me going to jail, I will do everything in my power to protect you and make sure that you stay open." So the state, they have a very dictatorial governor there, very leftist, Marxist, Governor Grisham. And she told the state police to go shut them down. And when they came to the church, the sheriff was there, and he said, "This is an official sheriff's office training and meeting. I have deputized just about every person inside the church, and we are not shutting down. And I'm pretty much in charge of this church and congregation, and my partner is in there, a deputized minister is in there, and we're not shutting them down, and neither are you." They left, and they never came back. And the sheriff kept his promise to this good minister. That church was not shut down a single Sunday. And we've had them come and do presentations, and we will before, and they do presentations all over the country. And it's called the Sheriff Shepherd Show. And on the other hand, there was a sheriff in Tampa, Florida, who arrested Pastor Rodney Howard Brown. He has a mega church out there. I've been there. I've met him. And this is a great man. I absolutely love Pastor Brown. And I asked him about the Sheriff Chronister, who arrested him for having church. And he goes, "Yeah, I've forgiven him." I said, "But the question remains, has he repented?" Mm. And he says, "Well, that's his problem. He doesn't go to my church anyway, but I hope he has." The question I have for both of you and for the American people, because this is the epitome of the work that we do at the CSPOA. We train sheriffs to be constitutional. We train sheriffs to keep their oath. We train sheriffs to enforce and live the Constitution, and thereby protecting the civil rights, the God-given rights of every human being in their jurisdiction, in their county. That, to me, is the answer to everything going on wrong in Washington, D.C. We are planning now a September 7th national conference for sheriffs and county commissioners and the people of this country who also want to come and see this historic event. That the sheriffs are now going to put federal agencies and the Congress and the White House on notice that there's a few things you're not going to do in my county anymore. And the first one would be, you will be required to check with the sheriff's office anytime you come into my county. And we're not saying we're going to stop you, and we don't want any trouble. But the main thing is, the next one would be, you are to follow and adhere to the Constitution when you're in my county, or we will take action against you. Mm-hmm. And so that's the way it's going to be. So my question is, which sheriff do you want in your county or in your community? Do you want Sheriff Hamilton, or do you want Sheriff Chronister? And this is what we work on every day. This is what I've dedicated my life to, because I don't see, Ryan and Justin, I don't see another effective and peaceful solution to the destruction of our country that's going on in Washington, D.C. And the greatest threat to our God-given constitutional American liberties is our own federal government.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it seems like it would be maybe not a bad idea for people to get to know their sheriffs, if that's
Absolutely.
That,
we teach that too. Yeah.
Yeah, like there in so many ways. And we've heard this sentiment many times that if anyone is going to actually hold some of these corrupt actors in government, whether it's local or even federal, that it has to be a sheriff. Is that true? And could you elaborate on that idea?
Well,
I don't know.
They're not going to police themselves. We already know that.
Yeah.
And so we would love the governor's office to tell the state police to stand against the crimes of the federal agents and maybe sometimes it's state agents. So yes, we just don't have any proof that other bureaucracies are going after other bureaucracies. And the chief of police is a bureaucrat, and we want him on board, and we need them on board. But they answer to the town manager, to the city council. And yes, the city council is elected, but the sheriff needs to be independent of them. He needs to be independent of their parties, whether it's Republican or Democrat. I don't care. I don't care about politics. I don't care about either party. I want the sheriff to remain independent and answerable to the people. The chief of police usually is not. We invite them to come to our meeting, especially on September 7th. We're really trying hard to raise money for that event, to where we pay for people's flights and their hotels. And we've done that before, way back in our first one. But this is going to cost us a lot of money. And people say, well, that, 2 or 3 million might be too much. I said, that is nothing in comparison to what we're faced with losing.
Yeah.
Right.
So we really need everybody's help with that. Go to our website and make a donation for this. But this is the key point. This is the point of no return for America. Imagine, if you will, both of you, and everyone who's watching this, imagine what November 6th of this year looks like. There's two possibilities. We get Biden again, who we know is incapable of being president, or we get Kamala Harris, who looks like the front runner to take his place, who is worse than Biden, because she doesn't have anything wrong with her physically, and she's stupider than he is. But the other one is, if Trump wins, what does America look like on November 6th as he is going to be president-elect? How much violence do you see? What do you see America doing? And that you believe that all these leftists that have committed so much violence the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and the lies that they've told about it, the subterfuge they've used, the manipulation they've used. How many FBI agents were at January 6th? They won't tell you. They've admitted that some were there in plain clothes, but they will not tell you how many. Merrick Garland refuses to obey the law and refuses to turn over the investigative tapes of Joe Biden, from a lawful investigation. Merrick Garland will not obey the subpoena power or the request of Congress to turn that over. Why? Because he's protecting the president, who he knows cannot be exposed to the American people or to the world, because he would be the laughingstock, and America would also be joining that laughingstock problem. And so it's okay to violate the law. It's okay to flaunt the rule of law, and tell the American people, I don't care what the law is. I'm not turning those tapes over. And I've seen some of those tapes. One of them was with my congressman, Andy Biggs. And Andy Biggs asked him, you won't turn those over because in his report said that Biden isn't capable isn't mentally competent to stand trial. Mm-hmm. And he said, why? Because he's a forgetful old man and the jury will feel sorry for him. Is that what that says? And is that the reason you're not prosecuting him? And he goes, you're not really, you've taken that out of context, but That's only one of many reasons. And Andy Biggs, Congressman Biggs, says, "Tell me another reason." and he says, "No, I don't want to get into that conversation. Tell me another reason." Then he sat there for a while and he goes, "Oh, well, President Biden was totally cooperative." And that's a reason you don't you don't prosecute someone? Look, I've been in court thousands of times. I've been in major cases: murder, rape, child abuse, robbery, bank robbery, any kind of crime that you imagine, shoplifting, bicycle theft, you name it, I've been there, I've seen it. Okay? Not ever did we tell someone to cooperate and then they would never be prosecuted. Never. Never. And Merrick Garland is a joke, and he's making a joke of all of this. And this is why we cannot trust what's going on in Washington, D.C., and we need to take America back.
Right.
County by county, one good sheriff at a time. And like you said, yes, all of you listening to this, you have got to talk to your sheriff. You've got to have a relationship with your sheriff and ask him what he will do if the mandates come back. Will you protect us from being arrested if we don't close our churches, our schools, or our businesses down? And will you protect us from not having to go to jail for not wearing a mask? And we've already now have all the evidence that all that was a farce, and that Fauci lied over and over. Just ask Senator Rand Paul. But we've seen the lies, and it's irrefutable. But now, what happens if it gets worse? And November 6th, I think it's going to get worse. I think we're looking at martial law. I think we're going to be looking at cities burning like crazy. Look how much the burning went in Portland and Seattle, and nothing was really wrong at that time. And so now imagine these groups that have committed this violence. How mad are they going to be if Trump gets back in?
Well,
we've got to be prepared. That's all I'm saying. We got to be prepared.
Amen. Well, a lot of those people who were active in 2020 riots and stuff, not all of them are quite as on board. Like the actual people, they're kind of breaking from the party and are politically homeless in a sense.
Right.
It's a lot of these college students, but the fact still remains that there is a network of NGOs with a small army of activists at their disposal and provocateurs that they can just start something, regardless.
Soros pays them and buses them in. I mean, they're paid to do this. They're paid, and they were paid at January 6th. And so, that scares me even more. If it were Americans who were walking the streets and marching in the streets and protesting, peaceful protests are completely allowed and must be protected. But then you always get these guys that start throwing Molotov cocktails and shooting and burning buildings and burning police cars. And that's criminal. And we need to be ready for that. And every one of them should be arrested. Funny how the FBI can use all sorts of technology to arrest everybody at January 6th, even people who didn't go inside. But they can't arrest the people from Portland or Seattle. Right. For all the crimes committed there. Even the sexual assaults that were complained about and brought to the authorities' attention in Seattle. They never arrested anybody. Those would be easy to solve. But the left has proven to all of us they will not go after the leftist anarchists and rioters. They won't. And so, folks, again, what do you think it's going to look like on November 6th? The reason we're having the meeting on September 7th in Orlando, Florida, is to make sure we're ready for that. And we're going to get 1,000 sheriffs there. And, folks, again, you must have a relationship with your sheriff and start preparing in your county and make sure that he, one, is a constitutional sheriff, and that he will stand and protect your rights and keep you and your family safe in his county. Yep.
Yeah, I want to get more into that, the solutions here with that. But it sounded like you're about to ask something. But before I get into what I want to say, do you want to say something, Ryan?
Yeah, well, this might play into what you're going to ask, but I was going to say General Michael Flynn always says, we've heard him say it time and time again, that local action has a national impact.
Yes.
It sounds like who you are and what you're doing.
He's been to some of our meetings, and
I
so,
imagine that was the case. Yeah. So
he loves our sheriffs, and he loves what we do, and so yes.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So you seem like the embodiment of that sentiment. And we can't all be sheriffs. So what else can we do at the local level that will have such an impact?
Well, you want to talk to your sheriff about being part of his posse, and that you tell him, hey, we want you to have a posse. How he does the posse is totally up to him. Sheriff Arpaio had the epitome of posses in American history. He had about 2,500 people. They even got some of their own posse patrol cars, and they were very professional, very well organized. A well-regulated posse is what he had. Or militia. Of course, the media has destroyed the M word, so we focus on posses. But tell the sheriff you want to back him, you want to support him, and you want to be part of the Minuteman and ready at a minute's notice to come and help him with any necessity that the sheriff's office might have, whether it be insurrections or riots or a parade, and helping with traffic control and helping people and helping elderly, or if there's a natural disaster, going door to door and checking on the elderly. Whatever the sheriff needs and whatever the community needs, we need volunteers. There are not enough deputies to handle things like that. And if the federal government were to try to come into your state and your county to confiscate weapons, as they did during Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans area. They literally went on their boats and door to door to take guns away from people. And that is all proven. And in fact, there's a video of an elderly lady getting her gun taken away. She didn't want to give it up. And so the police kind of beat her up a little bit. And that's on the NRA used that video. We told you this stuff would happen. When people need their guns the most, that's when government comes and takes them away.
That's right.
And so the question there is, what if they do that? Are you ready? Do you have a prepared response? And that is what we are getting, and that's what we're preparing for on September 7th in Orlando. So, folks, again,
excellent.
If you want that to happen and you want constitutional sheriffs in your area, join us. Every one of you and Ryan, you can both be members of the CSPOA posse. And it's a whopping $11 a month. And right now we have a special 1-year membership, which is usually $99. And right now for the month of July, it's $76. The spirit of 76, and we need your support financially, and we bless each other because we are out there every day recruiting and training and doing more to protect you with a constitutional sheriff. And so how many constitutional sheriffs do we have right now? We have trained over 1,000 in the last 10 years. The last 3 years, we've trained about 350, 100 of those in Texas. So we're focused. We've done Tennessee. We've done, we've even done California. But we don't have enough. 250, 300 that we have right now, that's not even 10%.
Right.
We've got to have more. And this is where you come in. Your sheriff listens to you. He works for you. You review his job performance every 4 years and to see if you want to keep him. That's a powerful position you have. And yes, go meet your sheriff. Take some cookies to your sheriff and tell him, hey, what can we do to help you and to make this a safer community, and be prepared for eventualities of the grid going down, of food shortages. You want to discuss all of that and those preparations with your sheriff, and specifically what happens if mandates come back. Would you be Sheriff Hamilton or would you be Sheriff Chronister? Now we invite Sheriff Chronister to come to our meetings, and we invite him to get trained. and we invite him to repent. And I would be the first one to love to have him come on board. But I have nothing but disdain for what he did during COVID, and that he could actually brag about in a news conference arresting a pastor for having church in the United States of America. So just so you know, that's how I feel about that. I don't think he's a lost cause, and I hope that his citizens will go talk to him. I've actually talked to citizens who have there. So folks, have a relationship with your sheriff. Go with your group, go with your organization, tell the sheriff to come to your group, tell him to come talk, do a Q&A with him, and make sure he knows how you feel about all of this, and especially about the United States Constitution. Will he be a dedicated servant to the Constitution?
That's right. And I wanted to take some time to underscore some things because, especially in our audience and a lot of the folks out there who I would argue are really waking up to how bad the situation is in this country and has been. There's a few things I want to really spell out for people that are really clear. The first is that what the federal government has done and all of the people that they've conscripted into this agenda is sedition. It's completely violating the original spirit of the Constitution, which was defend and protect the people's rights first and foremost. Mm-hmm. The Declaration of Independence actually provides that we abolish the government when it starts to act against the interests of the people, which it has been doing demonstrably for years. And since COVID and since Trump got in office, it's even more easy than ever to see that that's happening. But there's a logistical problem, which is that if you don't use the best tools possible to try to achieve that goal of rebooting the government, for lack of a better term, then you're going to have a Waco situation on your hands. And nobody wants that. You're going to have the government with the full force and power that the government has, with all the money, resources, training, technology, is going to come down and either make up stories about you, kidnap your wife, use the CIA to plant evidence, do everything basically they think they can to prevent you from doing what you should be doing, which is defending your rights and protecting the rights of your family and your community. But the founding fathers provided for us that tool, and that tool is the sheriff's office. And what you're doing, Sheriff Mack, is basically giving people the best tool, as far as I'm concerned. And I've been studying the law and how to fix these things, and why things are so bad, all sorts of stuff that I could spell out for hours and hours about how big the problem is. And what the sheriff solution does, as you just demonstrated with Sheriff Collister, is that his name? The guy who stood up to the government? Collister
was the one from Florida who violated the Constitution and arrested the pastor. Hamilton was the one that protected him.
Hamilton, okay. So Hamilton, what he did is he invoked the power. So if I want you to think, everybody listening to this, and I'm sure you know this, Sheriff Mack, that God gave us these rights. Nobody can really take them away. What they can do is they can convince you through various methods, news, movies, fear, intimidation, that the tool that you have that is literally in your soul that you could pull out at any moment cannot be used for any number of reasons. But when you do pull it out, which is what Hamilton did, I think, and he recruited all those people with him, then it basically stops the corruption in its tracks. Yes. Because the good thing that God gave in this whole creation that we live in, I would argue, is that light overpowers darkness every single time. A single candle flame can light up a dark room in ways that darkness cannot overcome. And so the reason I want to highlight that is that the government is outrightly and demonstrably guilty of sedition. They've stolen our rights. They've acted in corruption. They've done all these horrible things. And two, we have the sheriff's office. And thankfully, all the work you've been doing. If I had to try to figure all this out on my own, not being a law enforcer and not having the clout that you've had over the past 70 years, it would be a lot harder to do. But basically, I can go and get the information I need, the solutions I need to work with my community, my wife, Brian, the other people in my neighborhood that, one, are ignorant, two, don't know what the solution is, but three, are willing, if they get it spelled out for them, and actually create this coalition, this posse, so that we can go to the sheriff and hold them accountable. Hopefully the sheriff is not just an outright George Soros corrupted, person who's just going to work wholesale for the deep state.
There are those there. In fact, the one in Maricopa County, Arizona, where I live in Phoenix.
That's true.
He just left. He quit, and he was put in by Soros, and Soros paid him over $1 million to make sure his campaign would be successful. And he beat Joe Arpaio about 10 years ago, and then now he's quit. And I'm working now to get Jerry Sheridan elected in Maricopa County, and we got to have that here. But let me take what you first said, and it was powerful. You mentioned Waco. Well, two of the worst incidents in American history, especially recent history, were Ruby Ridge, Idaho, where Randy Weaver had his wife and son murdered. First his son one day, and then his wife the next. Literally, a woman in a log cabin, very rustic, holding her 11-month-old baby girl, Elishaba, had her head half blown off in front of Rachel and Sarah, and they got some sprayed on her while she stood with a baby in her arms. She posed no threat to anyone, and yet Lon Horiuchi killed her, murdered her. And then, of course, he got promoted right after that, and he's now, if he isn't retired yet, became the special agent in charge in Dallas. And now I'll tell you, the Waco, I don't agree with David Koresh. I would never have been a friend of his. I would have never gone to his church. I thought he was loony. However, whatever he did or did not do wrong, and the FBI tried to make it where he was this pervert and child molester and child rapist and raped all the women and blah, 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 all this. I don't know how much of that was fabricated, because I've talked to people who were inside. I've interviewed 5 survivors of Waco, and they said all that was not true. And they said there was no suicide pact between Koresh and the people inside. And they reminded me that we would not need a pact, because once the tank was knocking over our walls, the only thing that we had for heat and light were kerosene lamps, and those ignited the fire. So, and the FBI tried to deny that Koresh did it all. Let's just put it this way. If the sheriff had remained in charge and not acquiesced and allow the federal government to come in to Ruby Ridge and do what they were doing, or to Waco, Texas, 85 people would not have been killed. The law would have still been enforced, and we would have never heard of Randy Weaver, and probably wouldn't have never heard much of David Koresh either. And so this is a stark example of acquiescing and allowing bureaucrats who don't even live there try to come in and take care of a situation that the sheriff could have handled with a knock on the door, and would have. And one sheriff actually said that. He told the FBI and the ATF SWAT teams, he comes into town frequently, I can get him arrested anytime you want. Or I could go knock on his door. Both incidents were mishandled by the federal government, and these are 2 lessons that sheriffs should be learning, why we don't trust federal bureaucrats to come in and take care of local issues. And the law was broken in both incidents of using military equipment in domestic issues. So again, laws were broken by the federal government over and over, and a lot of people died at Waco, and 2 people died. 4 people got shot at Ruby Ridge. 2 survived barely, Randy and Kevin Harris, but Vicky Weaver and Sam Weaver were both killed. And how many times are we going to put up with this? Why do we think that the federal government is our boss or our ruler? They are our servant. The federal government was formed by the states, and they were assigned specific assignments. And so I want to go back to my Supreme Court case for just one quick. Scalia actually quoted the Federalist Papers. He's quoting the Founding Fathers in this decision. This is Federalist 51. Quote, hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. Something you were just mentioning, Justin. To the rights of the people. Get this now. the different governments will control each other. Folks, that's what this decision is about. And when we teach that to the sheriffs and they see that their duty is to control the government from hurting or abusing or oppressing or violating the rights of their citizens, and they catch on to that vision that this is your ultimate job and responsibility, Sheriff, not to allow my God-given rights to be taken from government and destroyed, or to destroy our families or everything else that we own and have. And then and the other one that I really like that really hits COVID hard and it really strikes home to the proper role of government. Scalia quotes a dissertation from another justice, and he says this. No, that's the one I just did. But we need to remember that the different governments will control each other. That's our job as sheriffs, as counties, as cities. And then he says, but the Constitution protects us from our own intentions. What was that? CDC mandates? They were not laws.
Right.
They were not legislation. And if they had passed those as laws, the sheriff would still have to stand against them, because evil laws have no standing and deserve no enforcement. Anything outside the Constitution, the sheriff has no responsibility to go along with legislation or mandates or statutes that violate the rights of the people or that violate the Constitution. And so he goes on. It divides power, the Constitution. It divides power among sovereigns and among branches of government precisely so that we may resist the temptation. That's key. Resist the temptation to concentrate power in one location as an expedient solution to the crisis of the day. The crisis of the day. Can you believe that they went that far? End quote. Crisis of the day is the end of that amazing quote. It's in this decision. You should all memorize it. I have. It's too important. It's too wonderful a protection for us all. If we have a sheriff that knows and understands and gets us. But listen, people, he can't do it without you.
Right.
You have to know it too.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at, and you perfectly described it, because we've basically have the founding fathers in their almost infinite wisdom anticipated the problems we're dealing with now and gave us one of the best tools we could possibly have. So that way, when I want to organize with Ryan, my people in my neighborhood, my church, and try to actually stand against the deep state, I'm not going to have a Waco situation. What I'm actually going to have is a Hamilton situation where we can actually speak to the sheriff, recruit them on our behalf, and remind him of his oath if he doesn't know, which I would, in my experience, that, you know, there's few like totally card-carrying deep staters in the world that I've seen. It's mainly people who don't know any better being deceived into doing things, you know. So you just have a conversation with some people, and, you know, this gives us the very tools that we need in the Patriot movement to work with people like Trump, General Flynn, and these other people who are attacking from this top layer. And then, as General Flynn likes to say, and Boone Cutler, that we can actually have a local impact. And frankly, I think we can do more with this power you're talking about right now than arguably anything that we could do trying to influence national elections, because the Constitution gave us the perfect defense in the sheriffs, because the sheriffs actually decide what laws are actually enforced at the local level. Would you not agree?
That's absolutely correct. The argument about what laws he enforces was over when he took his oath.
Right. Exactly.
He promised to uphold and defend the Constitution. He didn't promise to enforce everything that legislatures give him. And what do legislatures mostly do? They promulgate legislation according to the big businesses, big pharma, and big donations they got from their donors during the campaign. And you want to know who created seatbelt laws in America? The insurance companies. Right. They did. So we're actually living right there. And if you get a traffic ticket, what happens? you get points, and the insurance companies automatically get that information from the government, and then they raise your insurance premiums. And so the insurance companies make it both ways. They get to make those laws, and then they get to take money from you, because these vapid politicians follow the big donors, and insurance companies are big donors. And so this is happening nationwide. How do we stop it, folks? And you alluded to this, Justin. I gotta say this. This is not going to remain peaceful if we don't have the sheriffs involved. If the sheriffs are not standing as the stewards and protectors of their counties, this is not going to remain peaceful. My wife and I have dedicated our lives to this organization. This organization isn't important. I'll throw the hat away. The hat isn't going to last. I want all of you to have a hat. Please do. But even like January 6th, I was invited to go there numerous times. I said, folks, don't go. I'm not going. None of our hats were there. None of our shirts were there. None of our lanyards, lapel pins. They tried to make it that we were there because they want to destroy this sheriff movement. Southern Poverty Law Center, CNN, MSNBC, NBC, numerous others are attacking me and the CSPOA daily. Look at the stuff about us on the internet. There are so many lies. They are trying to kill what we're doing. They're trying to stop it so that their effort to destroy America and take over America, the communist Marxist takeover of America, is what they are promoting and what they're trying to do. We are trying to stop that. And at this point, folks, we can still keep it peaceful, but you've got to get involved. And so join the CSPOA so that we can help organize all of you and train you to how you can help your sheriff. And we have a webinar every Wednesday for our posse members and anybody else who wants to come on and get trained and be a cohesive organization as we stand and take America back together. Folks, a sheriff can't do it alone. He's got to have you behind him. I know some sheriffs that have done a few things on their own. I did a couple of times. I didn't have to call a committee together to make it happen, but I stood against the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers when they came into my county, and I ran them out, and they left, and they didn't come back. Sheriff Brad Rogers in Elkhart County, Indiana, ran the FDA and the people that were inspecting an Amish farmer's farm, his dairy, and that farmer asked for help from me and from Sheriff Rogers, and we gave it. And we end up fighting. They threatened to arrest Sheriff Rogers. The federal government, the FDA, threatened to arrest him for obstruction of justice and interference. And he stood up to him, and he said, if you have to arrest me, go ahead, but you're not. I'm going to arrest you if you come back in here and pretend to be police and try to harass and oppress this good person, this good farmer in my county. And it wasn't like that's political hay for the sheriff, because the Amish don't even vote.
Right.
He was doing the right thing. He was doing his job, Sheriff Brad Rogers. And now he's a county commissioner. He's running for county commissioner again. This is his second term as county commissioner. We certainly hope that he'll get reelected. But folks, this is what sheriffs have done, and this is what they can do. And we need your help.
Amen.
And maybe we need to remind everybody of the last sentence of the Declaration of Independence. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We need each of you to join us in that holy cause. My wife and I, my family, have dedicated our lives to this. Are you dedicating your life and your fortune and sacred honor to it? Oh my gosh, everything we get, we put in right back into this movement, into this company. The first 7 years of existence, all the books I sold, all the donations that came in went right back to forming and keeping this organization alive. We were first formed in 2011. We're still paying our bills. We have a couple of employees that get a little bit of money each month. but is not very much. I mean, we're a skeletal crew and on a skeletal budget. I pray to God that he will send us the money and send us the people with the money so that we can have this event on September 7th. Folks, we have to try this. Mm-hmm. We have to do this. And this is our last hurrah. This is our last ditch effort to keep this movement peaceful, because I don't think we're going to have another chance after November 6th. Right. And I think some really horrible things are going to happen this year, and we've got to be prepared for it. We can prevent them, but it's going to be up to us to get involved. And I'm begging each of you, everyone, get involved with us. Go to CSPOA, CISPOA. Go to CSPOA.org, join our posse, make a donation, be ready to come to our webinars every Wednesday, and let's take America back, county by county, one good sheriff and his posse at a time.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really enthusiastic about this. I'm definitely going to be trying to go. I'm certainly going to sign up. This is something I've been passionate about for a while, but I didn't realize to the extent how well you've been organized and how much success you've had. So it's very encouraging to hear. Ryan, did you want to jump in with anything before we start to wind down?
No, I'm just thinking about, like, how are we going to get in touch with our sheriff down in Atlanta?
Yeah.
Well, do you actually live in that county?
We live in Forsyth County, which is north of.
Go there, and if you have friends or that, look, we're not going to get every sheriff, and especially the big blue areas like Chicago, New York City, but we have great sheriffs right outside New York. And we have great sheriffs right outside Los Angeles. Riverside County, he's been making all sorts of interviews and even ads about how we've got to do this, and that he's totally supporting Trump, and we've got to have Trump, or the country's going to go violent and go crazy. So Sheriff Bianco has done some real good stuff online and with national media. Great guy. I know him. And folks, we've had these sheriffs taking a stand. A sheriff in San Juan County, California, investigated election fraud and arrested a city councilman in a neighboring city in his county, arrested a city councilman for harvesting ballots.
Wow.
And so we had Sheriff Wilma in Yuma, Arizona, arrest people for harvesting ballots. Some judges in New Jersey called an election null and void because of cheating. The greatest cheating going on in America for election fraud is millions of illegal aliens coming in and registering to vote.
That's right.
And that is happening.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the Democrats cheating, and it's criminal from the White House to many others aiding and abetting this process. One, illegal aliens coming into our country, an invasion that they're supposed to protect us from, and registering illegal people to vote. Mm-hmm. Two crimes committed by our own government.
Yep. Sedition. Yeah, we'll have to have you back, because we didn't even get into some of the other stuff we wanted to talk about, and there's obviously so much to cover. But there's two things I want to mention to people that we're actually writing an article right now, or I should say, about some things that the deep state has in store for when Trump wins. In my opinion, I think they know that Trump is going to win. They cannot stop him, although no doubt they'll try. And they've got some lawfare that we haven't even seen is going to be coming up. So this is why the solution you've been talking about, Sheriff Mack, is so powerful, because lawfare gets stopped in its tracks when you have the sheriff doing what they needs to do. Michael Waller is a former CIA man who was talking about some of the war game scenarios that the deep state's been doing over the past 12 months in preparation for Trump's inevitable win in November. And Matt Taibbi was just talking about with Tucker, two Tucker interviews, as a matter of fact, Mike Waller and Matt Taibbi were talking about some of the things that the deep state has in store. So that this couldn't be more poignant and, well timed when it comes to giving people the information they need. There's so much that can be achieved with what you're talking about. So definitely check the links in the description, everybody, for all the stuff we've been talking about today. I'll put the Sheriff Mack, your website, in there, that pocket handbook that you were talking about. I'm also going to include, that one right there. I'm going to include the UCADIA Maxims of Law that we've been releasing. And one in particular I think are really good for people to look at is the Maxims of Positive Law and Maxims of Sovereign Law, which really get into not only how messed up the law system has been, and it details a lot of that, but it also shows you what a good law system actually looks like. And as far as I can tell, I mean, it's like you're getting a download from heaven when you read this stuff, because these are the tools that we should have had, that the founding fathers probably wanted to give us, but were scrubbed from history, that we can actually have to know how to invoke our rights and defend our rights, and create a tradition of doing so in this country. So is there anything else you want to let us know about before we start to wind down?
Well, I thank you for the time, and really appreciate your friendship. And hey, I'll come back once a month or whatever you want. This is what I do during the day, and trying to wake people up and trying to just make sure people know there is a solution. There is a peaceful and effective solution, and we want you to be a part of it. God bless us as we do.
Amen.
Amen. Awesome, everybody. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. Really appreciate your support. Of course, don't forget you can support us at the vigilant.news website. Check out our Substack, vigilantnews.substack.com. Check the links in the description, and we'll see you next time on Vigilant News.